Good morning and welcome to Microsoft Power Platform and Microsoft Teams. I am Tom Morgan, Product Innovation Architect at Modality Systems, and over the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the Power Platform and Microsoft Teams and how the two work together and how you can use the Power Platform to accelerate the things that you're doing with Microsoft Teams. I've turned on my webcam just so that there's a bit more engagement. I know it's always kind of quite hard on a webinar to kind of keep everyone entertained and kind of keep those engagement levels up. So that's why I've turned on the webcam, and also I find it hard to talk at the wall for 30 minutes. So now more than ever, actually, I think it feels like knowing how to perform tips and tricks around Microsoft Teams using other tools is really important. We're seeing so much accelerated onboarding of Microsoft Teams. We're seeing how people are kind of coming in and just Teams is being rolled out everywhere, and knowing the things that you can do to not only help that process succeed, but also when users are there, help them work smarter, work more effectively. Teams is a very good hub for getting stuff done, a very kind of all the information flows into Teams, the conversations happen there, the interaction happens there. That works much better if users have the ready access to the things that they need in the right place at the right time. The more you can reduce that context switching of information, the better it's going to be. So what do we mean when we say the Microsoft Power Platform? Well, Microsoft Power Platform is a kind of, it's an umbrella term that Microsoft have for really four key technologies: Power Automate, Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Virtual Agents. What we're going to do is go through each of these in turn. I'm going to explain briefly what each one is, in case you're unaware of it and you haven't come across it. It's not going to be like a full deep dive into each one because we don't really have the time. But hopefully there's enough there that if it sounds like it's interesting, then you've got enough information to go away and find out some more. Then I'm going to look for each one how it works well with Teams and the things that you can do with Teams, and the kind of scenarios that you can unlock. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Power Automate. Power Automate is the thing that used to be called Flow. So I may still call it Flow, so I'm going to apologize now because old habits die hard. It's been called Flow for quite a long time, and it's now being rebranded as Power Automate to fit within the Power Platform family. Yeah, and so we're going to go through those four and just kind of talk about, how that interaction with Teams makes sense. We touched a little bit on the why. This is kind of, I'm not very good at the visuals of PowerPoint, but like the point I'm trying to make here is the intersection where Microsoft Teams and users and data all combine. Actually, that's where stuff is really valuable, because all your users are actually, this is a great, the current circumstances are a good example of actually things are uncertain and they're changing, but more and more people are moving over to Teams. Some of those people will be using Teams for the first time. I think as admins, as IT experts, as Teams experts in our respective organizations, I think we have that kind of responsibility to help users who are maybe in Teams for the first time. A big part of that is familiarity. If you can bring them the data that they are already expecting to see and that that they need to get their job done, not only will they be more effective and more productive, actually, I think they'll be more comfortable, they'll be more accommodating, they'll be happier, they'll understand more about why they're in Teams, how Teams works, if they can do it in the context of the work they're trying to do anyway. So there's kind of two real reasons for kind of bringing these two things together. One is definitely all about productivity, but I think there's also a slightly softer part to that at the moment, because just in the context of lots of different users being kind of so into Teams at the moment for the first time. Okay, so let's start then with Power Automate, the technology previously known as Flow. So if you're not aware of what this is, think of it a bit like a glue, like a recipe-based system for quickly building up these flows to react to events. So if you're at all familiar with if this then that, it's a kind of a version, it's a bit like that, but much more geared to the Microsoft platform. The idea is that it's got an easy way to connect to lots of different Microsoft services, so Office 365, Azure, Dynamics, lots of third-party services as well. You can quite quickly build up flowcharts to react to different events. So for instance, a file being dropped into a SharePoint location, an email arriving in somebody's inbox, you can then take actions on those. You can move them elsewhere. You can do all sorts of things. You can just sort of drag this flow chart together with these different actions based around this data. So you've got lots of options there. You don't have to do it in response to things. You can do it on a schedule. You can do it on demand with buttons. There's a mobile app. You can make buttons for your users. So if there's like a specific user action that happens. So one example that I like to build up with people in doing training is a flow that starts with the mobile app and a button on the mobile app. And the use case is, let's say you have a surveyor who needs to take photos of a particular sort of landscape or whatever and upload them securely to the central kind of repository of images. Well, he or she can do that with Flow. You start with the mobile app and there's a button on the mobile app that prompts for a picture. So Flow is on the mobile app is smart enough to open the camera, do the camera integration. The developer doesn't have to write any of that stuff. The surveyor can take the photo, and it goes up and it gets stored securely in a SharePoint location. So all the data is secure in SharePoint. The flow will automatically add some tags to it, and it will automatically expose it in a Teams channel. So we're coming into bringing Teams into the mix as well, because actually in our scenario, let's say some of these photos need review because maybe they should be public, maybe they should be kept private. So there's an option there for somebody else who's not the surveyor to review those photos and take action on them. And again, it's all driven by Flow in the background. So Flow is a very kind of powerful tool for very quickly automating processes. There's some examples on the screen of other things you can do with it. And then the screenshot on the left there is really just kind of showing you how it looks when you build up Flow. So you don't need to be a developer. That's kind of a really important point here. You can build this up visually. It's a nice flowchart style interface. Okay, so how does this work with Teams? Well, there are some connectors for Microsoft Teams, and this is where it kind of gets interesting because you can bring Teams into your flows. So if you have existing flows in Power Automate, then you can add Teams into that, because Teams is a great place to notify people that stuff has happened. Rather than sending them emails or notifications, you can put it into a channel, because then everybody gets to see it and it's there kind of persisted. You can also react to new channel messages. So it might be that you have a specific team or a channel for like emergencies or things that need high priority actions. You might want to assign a flow to that. So every time a new message gets posted and there's some action happens. And you can read the content of the message. You can take action based on the content of the message as well. So you have lots of different options. So I would encourage you to play with this. If you've done anything with Flow, then just know that you can bring Teams into the mix really easily. If you haven't, it is definitely worth exploring, because there's lots of little things in a business that can be improved just with a little bit of just moving data around, just little actions, and that's exactly what Flow is meant for. And the support that Flow has for Microsoft Teams now kind of means that you can keep that into the communication part in Teams, which is where your users are and where everyone's familiar. You don't have to roll out a whole new communication message. If you use shifts, then there's also lots of support as well for shifts. I didn't put it on the screen, but there's plenty of stuff if you have shifts for Teams, for your frontline workers. There's lots of support there for doing that stuff as well. Okay, so that's Power Automate. Next in the Power Platform family, we have Power BI. So this is much more about reporting. So Power BI is Microsoft's visual reporting tool. It's designed to make it easy or easier for non non-developers, non-data scientists, but kind of business professionals, power users to quickly visualize large amounts of data. That data might be in SQL, it might be in Azure, it might be in Office, it might be in AD. You can pull it together from lots of different places. It's got powerful rules around aggregation and sorting and grouping. It's pretty performant at scale. And it makes it very easy for end users and power users to kind of slice, to dice, to pivot data around. If you haven't used it, definitely you should go and try it. I'm not going to spend ages talking about it on this because that's kind of not really the focus, but I just want you to know it exists. It's part of the Power Platform. It's a very powerful reporting tool. So it's definitely worth digging into if you haven't already. How does it work with Teams? Well, there's actually kind of two ways really that Power BI and Teams interact. So first of all, Power BI can be brought into Teams, into a specific team and channel as a tab. There is a dedicated tab type for Power BI. What does that mean? It means if you're in a channel in Teams, such as in this screenshot, along the top where you've got the conversations and the files, you often have the wiki there as well. You can add more things, more tabs to your channel at that point. One of the things you can add is Power BI. And if you do that, you can then specify exactly the Power BI dashboard that you want to expose in this team. That's really valuable. If you've got a team that's dedicated to a particular project, to a particular outcome, you can build Power BI reports that service that particular outcome, KPIs, key information, trends, whatever else it is, and you can pin that, if you like, into that channel so it's always there. This is a really important part of the Microsoft story around Teams, because it's all very well somebody building out these great Power BI files that tell people working on a particular project all the useful stuff they need to know, but it's no good if they have to remember to go to the powerbi.com page or open the Power BI desktop app in order to go and see those things, because that just users forget over time, and also it's a big context switch for users to kind of move away from one application to another application. So really kind of key to that is like bringing that information in where users are, and this is a really good example of that. Just exposing the parts of Power BI that are really important to the task in hand at the time. So that's one way. The other way that Power BI and Teams integrate really well is something that's relatively recent, so January this year, and that's a dedicated Microsoft Teams Power BI connector. So this is completely different from what I was just talking about, and this is not specifically about exposing data around users. This is having access to the core Microsoft Teams data. So if you're an IT admin who cares about the amount of Microsoft Teams activity that's happening, the quality, how many calls, how many streams, all that kind of stuff, and you want to visualize that, there's a Power BI connector that makes it very easy for you to visualize that data in Power BI on your tenant. I've got some screenshots because if you're interested in this, you'll be very interested in it. So I've got some screenshots that we can go through the next couple of slides. This is good as well because it's relatively up to date. So I think that the official term is near real time, and obviously, like, it depends on, there's quite a lot of factors that go into what happens from when a call hangs up to the stream, like the data about that call being streamed up to Teams, being made available in your tenant, being made available to Power BI, you refreshing the Power BI and then seeing it. But previously, we would be talking days. This is much more minutes, sometimes hours. All of these numbers are kind of a little bit pinch yourself at the moment in the current circumstances because numbers are all over the place, but you kind of get the intent. It's near real time. The other thing is that there's options around PII. So different organizations will have different requirements for PII. This call quality data can be quite personally identifiable. So there are options in how you set up this data for whether or not you mask or don't mask your PII. So this is just some screenshots. So this is from some reporting and some reports that we have as a product. So we are taking the access to that CQD connector, and this is something anyone else could do. Like, you could do this in your own tenant. You have access to the CQD connector. there are some stock reports that Microsoft give you. You can make your own. We've made some. We think they're useful. We think they tell a useful story, and we've done some additional calculations on top of what Microsoft give you as well to kind of make sure that we can answer the questions that we need to for our customers. And we make this is available. You can take as part of our diagnostic service. So we actually focus less on the kind of more visual. Like if you look at these sort of, there's a lot of visually appealing graphics here. We do that. Actually, the screenshots I'm showing you are much less like that. In fact, they're much more kind of all about the data, because actually a lot of the time what we find is IT admins are coming here to solve problems. They want to know right now what's bad, what's good. Data, like putting the data out like this, is quite a good way of doing it. So instantly you can see poor streams, like what's that mean as a percentage of your overall poor stream count. Should you be worried? Should you do something about it? And then really digging into that. What does that mean? What does that mean by the different types of networks? So let's really break it down. So this is the intent. Like you can go really deep in this data to understand where your problems are happening, and what you should do about them, and what exactly is going on. This is at like a subnet by subnet level. Also, you can see like based stream by stream. Is it one way? Is it both ways? Why is it happening? Is it round trip time? Is it jitter? Is it packet loss? You get a fairly deep level of data and detail about exactly what's going on. And I'm just kind of skimming over these. The idea is just to show you the kind of data, the detail of data that you can get from the connector. We do some stuff around devices as well. So we've layered on what we know about certified devices to be able to kind of show poor devices causing problems and where those are non-certified as well. So that's good for organizations that have a device policy around certified devices and want to crack down and find out what's going on with poor devices. And also it's part of the user adoption story of like, do you know you're having bad calls and also you're not using a certified device, and we know that's the reason you're having a poor call. So bringing all that stuff together is quite useful. Okay, let's move on. So Power Apps, another part of the Power Platform family. So this is completely different again. This is about making it easier to build small kind of applications in a low code, what you see is what you get type environment. So all of these are kind of low code, no code solutions. They're designed either developers or non-developers. They can be a good quick onboarding process for developers. It means they don't have to kind of write everything from scratch. They can also absolutely be used by non-developers, so IT pros, business users, designers, user adoption specialists. Lots of different people can do this because it's very kind of drag and drop. Depending on what you want to do, there's a bit of a cliff in terms of it's easy, and then it suddenly drops into quite hard. That's kind of the case with all of these kind of low code solutions. But if you're doing something that is in the easy camp, so if you're doing some basic kind of some CRUD, so create, read, update, delete, the kind of standard, you're adding a thing to a SharePoint list, you're taking a thing away from a SharePoint list, or you're adding some data that's going into a database. If you're doing those things, then actually this might be a good choice. All of the connection to Microsoft-based services, so Outlook, Azure, SharePoint, is all kind of baked in for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So here's an example on the screen. This is kind of mocked up, but it's what you might see if you joined a company for the first time. So it's a simple kind of, it's a bit of data capture. It's also a to-do list, but really it saves somebody spending 6 months with a development team building an onboarding app. It's much quicker to do this in Power Apps. So Power Apps live inside your web browser. There's also a mobile app experience for them. So that the idea is it's a kind of a contained development environment. You build out these applications and then you give them to users and they consume them over through their website, through their web browser. It's all kind of inside your organization. It's on your tenant, and it's all hosted kind of in the cloud. It's not like downloading applications or anything like that. It all just kind of lives in the web and or on the mobile device. So it's great for kind of automating business processes. It plays really well with Flow, so Power Automate. So for instance, you can use Power Apps to capture a load of data and then throw that data to Flow. In fact, that's exactly what I have built in the last couple of weeks, because so we run a service called One Consultation. It's a remote video consultation system. It's specifically aimed at healthcare. So as you might imagine, we've seen a real spike in activity. It's been incredibly busy for us. We're onboarding new customers much more rapidly than we anticipated. So our onboarding process was a little bit clunky at that scale. So I wrote a Power App to automate that and to help capture the information we needed very quickly, and then throw that information to Flow. Flow then does the hard work of putting it in all the places that it needs to be in order to enable that service to work. Took me a couple of hours. It must have saved, like it saved that 100 times already, probably in the onboarding process. So this is a good way to capture information and automate business processes as well. It can get complicated quickly, but the kind of flip side is that you can bring developers in at that point. There's good handoff to .NET. There's good handoff to adding more complicated features. How does it work with Teams? So you can embed Power Apps in Teams as well. So you don't have to make your users go off to a website to consume your Power App or go to their mobile device. So again, very similar to Power BI. You can see here in this screenshot, what we've done is taken a Power App around processing returns, and we've embedded it inside the returns team. So anybody working inside the returns channel, sorry, for this particular team, anybody working inside this returns channel has very easy access to the returns app. And this is exactly how it should be. This is bringing the functionality users need to the places where they're having the conversations about those things. It's where they're living, and it's mentally much easier to deal with because you're not using 5 or 6 different applications to get your job done. You're using one place and everything is exactly where you need it to be. The other thing you can do is you can pin this entire Power App as a Microsoft Teams app. So there's an easy way to, in your Power Apps designer, when you're building it, there's actually an easy way to just click a button and say, add this to Teams. It's not entirely, I'm not going to lie, it's not entirely like straightforward. Like it's not crazy complicated. It's just not one click and you're done. It's one click, here's some stuff you need to do, and here's some instructions to get it into Teams, but you can absolutely do it. The nice thing about that is that that will show itself to the user as an app that shows up on the left-hand side of their bar down here. What that means is you can pin this so every user gets it. So you might have, I don't know, like some internal company application to do some things that everybody in the company needs to do. So you can pin that on the side here so every user always has access to it. Finally, the kind of final piece of the puzzle is Power Virtual Agents. Now this is new, relatively new. It was released at Ignite 2019. This is a way to make it easy to build simple chatbots using a visually appealing UI, so not using code. So again, it's designed at business users. It's designed for either non-developers or developers who haven't taken the time yet to upskill in the bot framework and in writing bot code, but just want to get something going. That means it can be a good place to start for proof of concepts. If you just want to get something up and running really quickly, you can use templates, you can use sample code, you can step through the UI to do really simple FAQ bots, to do simple Q&A as well, or like capturing information and then performing actions. It works really well with the rest of the Power Platform. So for instance, you can capture data using a bot and then hand off to a flow. There's built-in monitoring and analytics that you don't get if you write your bot from scratch. It's kind of looking at the way it's been built, looking at the kind of templates that are available. It's well suited for things like customer care scenarios or internal comms, quick query resolution. And right now, today, where we are, I think it's a good thing to consider for kind of answering questions at scale, for helping onboard people quickly, for scaling out. Interestingly, Microsoft have been doing some work in the US with CDC. They have a variant of this which is aimed at healthcare. So they have a COVID diagnosis healthcare bot that kind of tries to take some of the hard work, like at scale of being able to automatically diagnose people based on known kind of symptoms, and that they're rolling that. So what that means is CDC can expose it if they wish, on a web page. They can roll it out to people on a mobile app. You can consume it in lots of different ways. But what you're doing is making it easy for users to kind of go down a route and find information out for themselves. There's handoff to kind of humans as well that's kind of built into this system. So the other thing to be aware of is if you're kind of listening to this and thinking, well, this sounds like a lot like Bot Framework, it kind of is similar to Bot Framework under the hood. A lot of the code stuff is the same. So you can actually start with Power Virtual Agents and then flip to Bot Framework if it gets more complicated and bring your developers in. That's why it does make it a very good choice for proof of concepts as well. Okay, so using Power Virtual Agents and Teams together, yeah, absolutely possible. You can make Power Virtual Agents that users then consume in Teams. It's not the only way that you can consume Power Virtual Agents. You can consume them embedded into websites and a number of different ways as well, but you can definitely doing it in Teams is very much a supported way of rolling Power Virtual Agents out to your users. I'm going to be totally honest and say it's not the smoothest process in the world. I think it's down to the fact that the PVA is still very new as a technology. Like I say, it only just came out at the back end of last year. There is a bit of a multi-step process. It's likely to get smoother over time, I think. It's probably fair to say. So I think watch this space, but it's totally possible today, but just don't expect it to be a one-click process. Other thing worth knowing, there may be other approaches available to doing this, like Bot Framework, that are worth investigating depending on kind of the skill set and the resource you have. And they may end up a little bit cheaper as well because PVA is licensed. So just be aware of the licensing costs of doing that. Because it's part of the Power Platform, every part of the Power Platform is licensed. That's probably fair to say across the board, actually. It's just be aware of licensing pricing for some of this stuff. But for getting something up and running very quickly, it's a great choice. Okay, that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I did mean to leave some time for questions. I've not quite done that, but we'll see. The thing I kind of wanted to say in conclusion, really, is that I said this earlier, it's about making your users more productive, and that's great and important, but it's also about making them happier, and it's about making them more comfortable. And I think you can do that by bringing familiar things to them. So their data, their processes, the things they need to do every day, bring those into Teams alongside the conversations they're having, and they'll thank you for that. There's lots of different ways of doing that. We've explored the kind of main ones that come out of the Power Platform, and you've seen how they integrate with Teams. There are often multiple ways to solve the same problem, so that's worth looking at as well. I'd say be aware of the licensing and pricing implications, for sure. Just know what they are. Just scale, like what it might work out at proof of concept, but it might actually end up being more expensive than you imagined. Perhaps if you roll it out at scale, just all those things are just worth being aware of. And then also keep up to date with improvements. This is a very fast-moving area. So keep up on the blogs, keep up on the kind of the tech news as well as things get rolled out, and Modality can certainly help with that with webinars like this. Okay, we've got actually about a minute left. So if you have any questions, that's great. If not, no problems. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Okay, just one question we can take real quick about how do you know which one to use when? That's a really good question. It totally depends is the consultant's answer. Flow is easier to get started with, I would say, than something like Power Apps, unless you're a developer. If you're a developer, you might like Power Apps because it's basically an IDE. Flow you might find too restrictive. If you're a business user, I'd come at it from the other way and start with Flow. See if you can get it done in Flow. If you can't, then go to Power Apps and look at the templates in Power Apps. The only difference to that is if it's anything to do with visualizing data, go straight to Power BI, because Power BI is the right place to do that. Or if you absolutely know what you want is a bot, then obviously you start straight in on Power Virtual Agents. But for those two, Flow and Power Apps, yeah, where it is, you could probably solve the same problem using either. I'd approach it that way. Okay, I think we're out of time, so I'm going to say thanks very much for watching, and great, let's go build apps on Power Platform.